Thank you, everyone, for being here for our Sustainability 101 ESG Essentials course, Understanding the What and Why. Thank you all who have joined in. I see we have a bunch of people here online. So to get started, my name is Angie Whitfield, and I am the new CEO here at the Burnaby Board of Trade. And before we get started, I just want to take a moment to recognize that we are on the traditional homelands of the Halkamalam and Sahamish speaking people, and we extend our gratitude for the opportunity to be able to host workshops like this on their territory today. Now, I'd also like to thank our climate, sustainability, and business program leaders. The Burnaby Board of Trade has been fortunate to be a leading chamber in this space for the last 15 years. We've been leading in climate, sustainability, business programs that promote environmental sustainability and business practices. The gold partners in this area are Alexander College, Electronic Arts, and Veolia. Thank you to those three for stepping up. And as always, we have a host of annual partners that support the work that we do here at the Burnaby Board of Trade all year long. And I believe you will now be seeing their logos up on the screen. So if we could take a moment and appreciate the contributions that they make to our organization. Now, at today's event, we are going to hear from the Government of British Columbia's ESG Centre of Excellence. This session is going to cover the basics on environmental, social, and governance, ESG, and the benefits it brings to your organization. And next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our presenter. We are very fortunate to have Megan Armstrong and Jennifer Horseman here with us today. So Megan Armstrong is a business advisor at the ESG Centre of Excellence. She joined the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy in 2008 and has a significant role in shaping the recycling for this province. Over the decade, she has served as a unit head in the Extended Produce Responsibility section, where she has actively contributed to regulating and implementing several national recognized EPR, industry-leading recycling programs. Earlier this year, she took on a new challenge as the business lead for the BC Ministries of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovations, and recently launched the ESG Centre of Excellence, where she supports and provides local tools, knowledge, and guidance necessary for BC businesses to thrive in sustainability-focused landscape. And we also have with us today Jennifer Horseman, and she is the partnership lead with the ESG Centre of Excellence. She's responsible for the stakeholder engagement, marketing, and communications. Jennifer forms strategic collaborations with external partners internally across government. Prior to this, she's worked as a trade and Invest BC, facilitating international investments, managing trade, servicing, strategic operations, program delivery, including executive missions, trade shows, and economic grants. So we have a lot of knowledge here with us to share. Thank you both for being with us. And on no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Megan and Jennifer.
That's great. Thanks so much, Angie. Well, we do have a presentation today, so maybe I'll ask Rasanga to open it up. And it's great. Oh, I think we see the, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing the notes there. Maybe full screen.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll just share it now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I just want to say good morning, and I should acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the Quiquitlam First Nation territory. So thank you. And yeah, my name is Jennifer Horseman, Partnerships Lead. I'm here with Megan, and I know Burnaby pretty well. I grew up there, so went to school, hung out at Metrotown Mall quite a bit, know that mall very well. But we're here today to talk about ESG Essentials, and we're going to talk about what it is and why it matters for businesses and organizations. And so before we start, I wanted to get a sense of the businesses and organizations here today. So I have a poll, and if we could get the first poll up, maybe Sarah, thank you. Yeah, we wanted to know, who are you? Are you a company? A big company, larger than 500 employees? Are you an SME? Are you maybe a college or government agency? Are you a nonprofit? Maybe I'll give you a couple minutes to just answer. It'd be really interesting to know the makeup, the business community here. And then, Sarah, if you could display the answers, that would be wonderful. Oh, wonderful. So I'm seeing that 50% are SMEs, which is our target audience. It is smaller businesses, but ESG applies to all of the players here. So that's great. Very interesting. Thank you. Great. The topic of ESG has skyrocketed, and the topics of sustainability, climate change, DEI have become mainstream, and so has ESG. So today, we will talk about what ESG is. So I'll go over the ESG, the pillars of ESG. I'll talk about, before that, I'll talk about the ESG Centre of Excellence and what we do and what our objectives are. And I will go through the pillars, the fundamentals. Then I'll talk about the business case for ESG, the value proposition, and then I'll pass it over to Megan, who's going to be talking about the ESG journey and share a fictitious case study. And she will cover the many tools and resources available at the ESG Centre. And we're hoping that we'll take 30 minutes for the presentation, but we hope to carve out 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you've got a question, please feel free to save it for the end, and we'll answer them at that time. All right. So the ESG Centre of Excellence, this is a resource hub to help BC businesses on ESG. And our mission is to support companies to not only meet global ESG demands, but excel in competitive markets, whether they're domestic and local or international. And the centre is part of the BC government. We're part of the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation, and we are a pilot program. We were established to address the increasing need for businesses to align with global ESG standards. And with globalization and the shift towards a sustainable economy around the world, companies are facing pressure to demonstrate their ESG. And so the centre acts as a support system, offering tools, knowledge, and services for businesses to thrive in this changing environment. So we've got 3 objectives. They are to help BC businesses with such tools and resources and services. Also to attract ESG aligned investments. We don't want to welcome and attract any old investments. We want to seek like-minded partners and investors and buyers that are focused on the same values. Also, our third objective is to build our international reputation for ESG excellence. And we know that BC is a leader. The province has a commitment to high ESG standards, and we've got many BC businesses that are creating environmentally and socially responsible products and offer services. And so we want to strengthen that ecosystem. I should also say that the ESG Centre of Excellence is not a standard setter. We're not a regulator or certifier. We are a resource and support hub. So what is ESG? ESG is a framework that's used to evaluate a company's performance and operations beyond just financial performance. ESG covers the environmental, social, and governance pillars, which we'll go into. And ESG is rooted in risk management traditionally. It's a driver for private investment in capital markets. So there's many publicly listed companies that that are on the TSX and the NASDAQ. They've got sophisticated ESG reports because they have to. They have to provide this for their shareholders and asset managers. But while financial statements tell a company's financial story, ESG reporting is meant to cover the non-financial story for businesses. And it helps for the investments. But how is ESG relevant to a smaller company or an SME such as yourself? With globalization of supply chains, ESG is becoming increasingly relevant, and it's becoming more important to those players and all players along the value chain, because the value chain is interconnected, and the ESG demands are getting passed on further down the chain. And I'll talk to the trickle-down effects a bit later on. But ESG is becoming a must-do. It's not just a nice-to-do anymore. ESG can also be thought of as the 3 Ps. I like to think of it as the planet, people, and processes. So let's go into the E pillar. This is the environmental factors. This is probably the most straightforward pillar because it's data-driven and quantifiable. When you look at environmental factors, and these can include greenhouse gas emissions, carbon management, waste management, energy efficiency, and biodiversity, these are they're often quantifiable. Meaning you can have empirical evidence to show your environmental footprint and impacts. But getting this data and information can be challenging. You might be hearing more and more about Scope 1 emissions. These are direct emissions from company operations. And also Scope 2 is emissions from purchased energy. And now there's greater challenges on getting Scope 3 emissions. And so major corporations are being asked to get Scope 3, which is indirect emissions. And let's face it, we're seeing more extreme weather events like wildfires, and flooding, and droughts, and this is happening in BC locally. And more than ever, companies and organizations, maybe your business, are having to consider environmental factors and to really measure the risks and the impacts to their bottom line. And so what gets measured gets managed. And by understanding these environmental factors and trying to measure it, risks can be mitigated. The social pillar. This is how a business impacts people and communities. Social factors include labor practices, health and occupational safety, supply chain conditions, and community engagement. One example also is cybersecurity and data protection. And this is becoming very relevant in the news recently. Local companies such as London Drugs, even the BC government have become vulnerable to cyber attacks. And so ultimately the S pillar is about recognizing the importance of people, communities, and society. And that can include employees, suppliers, and customers. The governance pillar. Governance may be the least understood out of ESG, but governance refers to the processes, policies, and structures. They provide the oversight and accountability within an organization. And so governance factors include regulatory and fiscal compliance, board diversity, executive compensation, ethical decision-making. I like to think of governance as the backbone that ties the environmental and social pillars together. It allows for responsible business action. And although the G may be less visible, it is crucial because without strong governance, no company or organization can tackle environmental or social principles or goals, or meeting its sustainability targets. Understanding the language. ESG can be complex. You Google ESG and you get over 1 million hits. So it can be complicated. And then there's different terms. Good place to start is by understanding the differences. There's CSR, ESG, sustainability. Let's start with sustainability. This is defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And so you may have sustainability goals in your company. What is CSR? CSR is a starting point for businesses aiming to contribute to that goal of sustainability. It can include voluntary actions such as charitable donations, community programs, employee volunteering. It is part of the company's storytelling. And although it might not affect direct core operations, it builds goodwill and social well-being. And so 10 to 20 years ago, a lot of corporations had CSR teams, and it was a buzzword. A lot of companies publicized their positive impacts, but all this storytelling in the CSR created problems and challenges and accusations of greenwashing. And greenwashing is that term, it means misleading or false information about a company's environmental impacts, something being eco-friendly or green. And more people were demanding proof and evidence. And this is where kind of ESG falls in, is that ESG takes that a step further by embedding environmental, social, and governance factors into business strategy, but allowing for that data and quantifiable evidence to show that, a company is managing resources or treating people fairly or operating transparency. It's part of the story, but it's got the benchmarking and the metrics to back it up. So ESG and CSR are pathways to achieving the ultimate goal of sustainability. Now I'll talk about why. Why does ESG matter? And, what is the business case? Why should anyone care? Why should anybody embed it or integrate it? Why should anyone start collecting data and reporting it? There's a lot of advantages for ESG. So I'll go through a few of them here. It's first and foremost, the financing and funding. Banks, financial institutions, lenders are increasingly applying an ESG lens to financing. And this means that if your business doesn't meet their ESG criteria, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get capital. And that could be loans, grants, or credits. An example, in a recent study, 73% of global banks offer green financing solutions, but only 3% of SMEs have applied for it. And so that's a huge missed opportunity. Next is supply chains and procurement. And I think this is really key for SMEs. This is how ESG is coming to the forefront and starting to matter, is that with the global economy and supply chains, all the businesses along the chain are being affected. And so a lot of the multinationals, a lot of the bigger corporations are having to report on scope 1, 2, and 3. They're requiring emissions data, or they're requiring inclusive hiring practices from their distributors and suppliers. And so if your business falls on this chain, then the mandatory disclosures are starting to affect you. It causes a domino effect. And the same for procurement. More companies and governments are requiring ESG criteria within that bidding process. Last year, Canada introduced a new Supply Chain Transparency Act to monitor forced and child labor in supply chains. So this trend for transparency is only going to continue and strengthen. Talent and recruitment. For human resources and new talent, there's a new generation that's getting ESG. And rather than job title or salary, they're really wanting to make an impact. And they're wanting to make that impact through their work and employment. And so businesses that align with employees' values see a higher engagement and productivity. One Deloitte survey showed that Gen Z and millennials, over 70% of them, really find that a company's environmental policies are important when considering potential employment. Next is brand reputation. Companies with a strong ESG mean that they're transparent and accountable, and that can lead to better brand loyalty and market positioning. In one survey, 75% of consumers said they're more likely to purchase brands that are green or sustainable. So it matters to consumers and buyers. The regulatory compliance, adapting to regulatory requirements and integrating them with reporting is helping businesses prepare and to avoid penalties and establish themselves as responsible leaders. And 60% of businesses feel that moderate to significant pressure from regulators to enhance climate action efforts. And so this is becoming just more apparent with more mandatory disclosures. Risk mitigation. By addressing environmental and social risks, businesses can avoid potential disruptions and regulatory penalties. And identifying and mitigating risk can help climate change, human rights complaints, and other issues. In one survey by BDC, 50% of Canadian SMEs have already acted to reduce their carbon footprint in the last 5 years, and we expect this number to increase. Mitigating risk, it can create opportunities to create operational efficiencies. And so by implementing ESG, you're helping with your operational performance, and this leads to cost savings. A McKinsey study showed that executing ESG can affect operating profits by as much as 60%. And remember also that innovation results from sustainability efforts and is a result. So ultimately, all these advantages of integrating and reporting on ESG can lead to long-term value of your business or organization. And it can also better position you to navigate future challenges and seize new opportunities. It really is a way to future-proof your company. And so I've got another poll. I've spoken about the different competitive advantages on ESG. Wondering what advantage is most important to you? What is top of mind? Is it access to capital? Is it supply chains and procurement? Talent? Is it about brand and marketing? Perhaps regulations? Mitigating risk, or creating efficiencies? And we were just curious as to maybe which one is most relevant. And I'm sure you have more than one. And it might be hard to pick your top, but what is most relevant to your company or organization? All right, let's see the answers and see what's resonating. It's interesting. So 33% have said it's brand reputation, marketing. So most likely you've got products or goods, services that you are marketing and selling. And then also a second is operational efficiencies, which it makes sense, of course, efficiencies, reduce costs and create value. This is really interesting. Thank you. I'm going to pass the baton on to Megan, who is going to be talking about the ESG journey and a fictitious case study she's going to delve into. Megan.
All right, hoping folks can see and hear me as we switch to presenters. So thank you very much. So the good news is, whatever advantage you identified in the poll, an ESG strategy can help address that. And think of it, ESG as a roadmap with 3 of the crucial stages that you see on screen there. First of all, understanding it. This is where you grasp the core concepts of environmental, social, and governance factors and recognize their importance to your business. It's about knowing how these factors impact your operations and the broader environment. And the next stage is implementing ESG. And so once you understand kind of the pillars, the next step is to integrate these principles into your business strategy. This involves planning, defining actions, and ensuring that ESG operations are embedded into your day-to-day operations. And finally, reporting out on ESG. The final stage is about transparency and compliance and accountability. Effective ESG reporting involves measuring key metrics, ensuring transparent disclosure, and meeting regulatory requirements. It's crucial for demonstrating your commitment. And for those folks that said reputation, that's a really big part of it, is letting people know what you're doing. So I'm going to do a quick poll, and then we'll move on to the whole journey itself. So where do you think you are on your ESG journey? And if we can get the poll up for that, Sarah, that would be fabulous. There we go. So where are you on your journey? Are you just exploring the concept? You're here today, so you must be emerging. Are you learning about ESG and actually getting started? Have you started to think about what you would track? And then are you developing? Is it a little bit more embedded into your operations already for maybe other drivers that have been supply chain drivers? Or have you been doing this for a while and you're leading and it's integrated into your system, and that would make you certainly a front runner on this right now? So maybe we can see the results of the poll. I want to make sure we leave times for questions. So perfect. Exploring. This is wonderful. Wow, that's quite a split. Exploring, emerging, and developing, all kind of vying for the position there. So, and leading. So that's wonderful. I'd love to during the Q&A welcome any of those folks in the leading and the developing, for sure, to share some of their maybe challenges and how they got around them. So thank you for that poll. So what I'm going to do is take you through the journey via a bit of a case study, because it seems to be a great way of explaining it to people. So let's explore a fictitious company, WireX. It's a SME, a small medium enterprise with 90 employees, and they were established 30 years ago and started as a small manufacturing company. And since then, they've grown and evolved and offer specializing electronic parts, equipment, and services. So they're committed to sustainable manufacturing through responsible sourcing, which minimizing their waste and reducing emissions. But they don't market that. They do have a strong occupational health and safety program, staff training, and as a result, they have very low employee turnover. They support local charities and not-for-profits, and they haven't formalized any of these efforts in a plan to date. It's just a little bit here on their website, and there's small pieces you have to look for on their website. WireX has recently lost a major contract to a large corporation because the bid process focused on disclosure of GHG emissions management and some other sustainable operations. And so clearly the commitment to sustainability and working towards net zero without a dedicated system to capture their efforts and could mean more future lost opportunities. Similar to WireX, similar to a lot of the companies out there, they're very small and capacity is an issue. So one of the things they're feeling is the pressure to meet the regulators without the capacity to support that. So let's call our VP of operations for WireX, Michelle, and she's been hearing about ESG from industry peers and hears it talked about at conferences or on webinars like this. And she wasn't entirely sure what it meant for her company and could it help them? Maybe it was a structure they needed to navigate through these environmental regulatory pressures as well as winning more contracts. Of course, the first stage was understanding ESG in the journey. And Michelle, our VP of operations, she did, like Jennifer mentioned earlier, got online and was looking around, and there's a million websites coming at you that say ESG from consultants and software providers. So I think in order to cut through a bit of the noise, Michelle ended up calling the ESG Centre of Excellence for our free resources dedicated to helping smaller businesses with the complexities of ESG. So we offer one-on-one client services, and she took us up on that opportunity and filled out an introductory meeting request with the advisor. Then the advisor went over the ESG assessment form to assess the maturity of where WireX was on their journey, and then followed up with a secondary advisory meeting to just discuss the strategy and the way forward. Through the assessment, she could see that WireX had been doing a lot of things already, of which I mentioned at the beginning of the process, or the slide deck, where WireX was already doing some things. They were ISO compliant. They were working towards a green manufacturing certification. They'd won leadership awards in their sector, and they had many sustainable initiatives in health and occupational safety and social aspects underway. So the ESG Centre of Excellence, where I work, had the information and the tools and templates to help her pull this information together and start planning. There's also some courses out there at some of the major academic institutions within BC, the BCIT, UVic, and other ones, and UBC, where Michelle decided it was probably a good idea to enroll in some of these micro-credential courses and maybe bring some of her staff, because she knew that really you need to have more than one person. The whole company has to be involved in this journey. So part of the learning of the kind of the complicated part of learning about ESG is knowing that there's an ecosystem out there, and there's a lot of related frameworks and standards. You'll soon discover that it's more like an alphabet soup out there of ESG frameworks and standards. The ESG reporting landscape it's huge, and navigating the world of reporting, it can be a little complex. I'm not going to name all the frameworks or all the acronyms, but the ones you see on the screen right there are ones that you might have heard of, and you might hear of if you embark on your ESG efforts. There's the Global Reporting Initiative, which is about the impact your business has on the world. And then SASB, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, which is about the financial aspect, about the world impacting your business. And then, of course, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, focusing on that aspect as well. There's also a number of certifications out there. Some of you might have heard of B Corp certification. There's also the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which a number of companies will align their sustainable activities with as well. Corporations often adopt one or multiple. If you look at some of the larger corporations that report out on ESG, you'll see that they may report according to multiple standards, and they have the team and the capacity to do it, but you don't have to report to multiple. Thankfully, we're kind of at a point in time right now globally where the standards are realizing that they should start harmonizing. In fact, both SASB, and TCFD are consolidating into an international framework guided by the International Sustainability Standards Board, or ISSB as they call it. So the next step in the journey is implementing it. So you've got a sense after using perhaps some of the tools that we have to offer, or doing your own research, that you're already doing some activities that you could start tracking and maybe a little more formally and getting ready to report out on your efforts. So let's go back to our example with Michelle at WireX. The corporation corporation and publicly listed companies have the capacity and resources to develop and publish ESG, but smaller companies is challenging. So it starts with planning. With the center's free tools and guidance, we helped Michelle form a small but dedicated team that included our operations, finance, marketing, to work on a company-wide ESG roadmap and a strategic plan. The plan would be really simple at first: identifying what topics you could look at to track and measure. So they set out to look at these and decide what were they already doing? What topics are they already managing? In the world of ESG, this is called materiality. And she was looking at her sustainable efforts in tracking energy, waste management, their labor, and their hiring practices. This process, as I said, is called a materiality assessment. And it was essential to ensuring that the ESG efforts could be focused and effective and provided a good foundation for the ESG strategy. So I want to reiterate that she started with what they were already doing. During the process, they evaluated the frameworks that they might want to look at, the ones I mentioned just a little bit earlier on the side. And Michelle decided that WireX would align with the Global Reporting Initiative, or GRI, for its comprehensive approach, and SASB for its industry-specific focus. So then stage 3 in the journey is reporting out on ESG. So I don't want to mislead you. There is a little bit of a time frame between the beginning of this and the end of this, but once you've identified material topics and then track them and set some benchmarking, reporting is some place you may want to consider going. So why does it matter? Well, we said this at the top of the presentation, that reporting provides a clear view of your ESG performance, helping to build trust with stakeholders, including investors, customers, and even the regulators. It's accountability. It shows that you are not just talking about ESG, but actively measuring and managing your impact. This helps hold your business accountable for its commitments. And of course, some of you identified operational efficiencies and continuous improvement. Reporting allows you to track your progress and identify areas to improve, possibly gaining some efficiencies, and adjust your strategy accordingly. So let's our fictitious company, WireX, now turn to the question of how do you report on these efforts? So Michelle understood that they needed a governance structure in place to oversee the reporting. The team set out to assign responsibilities, formalize the process for data collection, and ensure compliance with reporting standards. They used a new reporting software that others in the industry were using. So although WireX selected the GRI and the SASB standard as their established reporting frameworks, I should stress that reporting can be as simple as aligning with the indicators of the UN that I mentioned earlier, the Sustainable Development Goals. Your ESG report initially can be a one-pager to start, just to communicate your progress or even what your baseline is. And maybe your achievements and other areas that you want to improve. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing to start. Transitioning from implementation or reporting involves not just documenting your efforts, but also communicating your ESG achievements and challenges. This transparency reinforces your commitment and builds credibility. So let's just go back to WireX again, our case study. So through the ESG reporting, WireX demonstrated progress in their goals to lower carbon emissions. They reduced waste and they enhanced employee health and safety. The report, which they shared with their stakeholders and they even published online, not only showed measurable outcomes, it set clear benchmarks for future improvement. The company's commitment to transparency and adherence to established frameworks helped build strong relationships with their staff and their partners, and of course, customers and the regulators. And they eventually established themselves as a leader in the manufacturing area that they're in. The process, as I said earlier, it's not without its challenges. I don't want to be misleading. There's an effort and a length of time to do this, but it is a process and a framework. But the potential rewards, and of course, they're clear. You can reduce operational risk, which many companies that have embarked on this have surfaced, enhance your reputation, access you to new markets, and perhaps most importantly, it provides you with the ability to grow, meet the growing regulatory demands that may disrupt your business. So in this case, Michelle knew that undertaking an ESG strategy was not a one-time project, but an ongoing commitment to do better. For their business, for the staff, and of course for in Burnaby and the world. This business story, well, I know it's fictitious, it's one of transformation and growth. By embracing ESG, they not only navigated the challenges of the evolving industry, but also positioned themselves as leaders in the sustainable manufacturing. Their journey serves as a blueprint. I'm hoping it serves as a blueprint for other businesses wondering whether ESG is right for them and how it can drive long-term success. So I know we presented a great deal of information today, but there are some key points that I'm hoping that you'll remember. ESG is essentially about transparency and accountability. It helps organizations manage risk and opportunities across the three pillars, the E, S, and G, and share this information. ESG isn't a new concept, but it has evolved, and regardless, we think that it is absolutely here to stay. With global supply chains, there's a domino effect of ESG related requirements and pressures that are kind of filtering down from smaller distributors and the suppliers. With international regulations becoming mandatory in certain jurisdictions, EU and other places overseas, ESG will impact small and medium-sized enterprises along value chains here in Canada for sure. ESG can be complex, but it doesn't have to be scary. Chances are your business already conducts ESG related activities, but perhaps are not marketing or reporting them as such, or maybe they're not part of your strategic plan, and maybe you want to consider that. So just one final takeaway is that the ESG Centre of Excellence has valuable tools, resources to support you and your organization, and it's all free. Our toolkit keeps expanding, and we're excited to offer more practical templates that you can see and worksheets that the business can use. If any of what I said resonates to you, or what Jennifer and I said today resonates with you today, and if you have any questions, you can please contact me at the center. I'm a client advisor, and we can start with just a short conversation about where ESG might fit with your business. I can help you fill out the self-assessment form to determine your ESG maturity, or if you want to know about how to go start a materiality assessment to identify those topics under each of those 3 pillars that you might want to report on, and that could be part of your framework, give me a call and let's discuss. You can check out our website or reach out to start your ES journey at any time. You can also access the ESG 101 guide if you want a little bit more of an time to think and read about the ESG process. So I'd like to thank you for participating today, and Jennifer and I are now here to provide answers any questions that you might have about the process or how we might be able to support you in your ESG journey.
Thank you both very much for all the information. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to either put your hand up, or if you want to type the questions into the chat, we can look at them there. I see that Perry has his hand up. Perry, if you'd like to put your question in the chat, I'd be happy to pass that along. And I think we...
Oh, I'm sorry about that, Andy. So yeah, sorry, if I put my hand up, I hit the wrong button.
Oh,
I just didn't want to learn about
no questions, Perry?
Well, yeah, there's lots of questions like around resources, around how we can, pull off these reports more effectively. So how do we just find that? Is that all on the ESG Excellence of ESG website, or are you going to distribute that information to the participants after the meeting?
Yes, yeah, we'll be distributing I had a little trouble hearing the question, but yes, absolutely. It will be distributing the information, and happy to talk to anybody. We offer an introductory 15-minute meeting if we just want to test the waters and see where you're at. Happy to do that.
Great, thank you so much. I'll be reaching out.
Okay, I have another question here, and it says, often the business case for ESG is difficult for the time-starved businesses, especially small SMEs. What would you say is the number one driver to help businesses overcome their hesitation?
What would be the number one reason to sorry, there was something, number one reason to
Often the business case for ESG is difficult for starved businesses, especially SMEs. What would you say is the number one business driver to help businesses overcome this hesitation?
Well, I think Jennifer, you're welcome to answer that too, but I would think the number one driver for this is that it definitely will surface efficiencies that you might be able to, with the things that you're doing anyway, like waste management or energy management. Or so there's money to be had, maybe money savings, which would then maybe allow you to get some capacity building happening. That would be the first thing. And the second thing is, I do think a driver is with all the stuff that's going on with making trade and in the news these days, that making yourself viable in that economy by having an ESG, because a lot of other trading partners, Europe, other places have ESG requirements on their businesses there that then will trickle down. So it seems like that is quite far away, but I think the other answer to that would be that with some of the resources we have workbooks, because it can be quite a daunting task. These are the kind of things that we have a ESG strategy workbook. You could start when you have a little bit of time and then pick it up and keep moving along. It's not like an all or nothing, like you have to start today and do it for 4 weeks straight. So I think the number one driver is efficiency, and then making yourself a kind of a future-proof by having at the ready these options that will, when someone, I had one company come to me that was being asked by one of their clients purchasing some of their materials from the States, from California. They were asked about what they were doing for GHG management and did they have any ESG topics that they were tracking. So it's there. It might be for much larger companies, but I do think the value is there from just cost savings as well as maybe investment as well as trading.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just to add to that too, Megan, I was just going to say that with, let's say a hammock maker in the Sunshine Coast, what I think they're finding is that the questions to maybe supply to one of the larger companies like a MEC, mountain equipment company, or diversify and sell to REI, those bigger companies are asking them through ESG questionnaires things like carbon emissions and supply the materials, that are that they're building from, and also hiring practices. These questionnaires that are being passed down to suppliers, I think it's really understanding, becoming aware and understanding what questions are these questionnaires asking for, and having that information ready so that when you've got these opportunities, that it doesn't take you so long and then it becomes a missed opportunity. I think for a lot of smaller companies, it would be to their advantage to be, again, ready, much like what Megan said with future proofing, to be ready with that data, and also to create a benchmark, and so that you're striving not for perfection but progression, and getting that data year on year, and making sure you know where that data is coming from and that you have it, and what the questions are going to be asked, because more and more big corporations are asking for that information and the data.
So we have another question here, further to that, and an extension to that. So how frequently do you see requests for proposals now, including ESG as part of the requirement?
Well, that's a tough one to say on frequency. I mean, I don't think there's any data on that, and I'd hate to use just a center as an example of that. I guess the way I would address that right now, unless Jennifer has an answer, is that the companies that have come to us when we launched just about a year ago were either coming because they were feeling some pressure, even if it was just a one day data point on something, or other companies were becoming because they had a really great story they wanted to tell. So those were the two camps that were of folks that were coming to talk with us. So I would say that there's folks out there feeling it. So I don't have a percentage for you. So Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to answer or add to that.
No, but I do find that with government contracts, for example, we've got impact procurement and social procurement, and it's happening at the provincial level, but also the federal level, Indigenous procurement as well. So it's really opening up it's actually putting a criteria, a lens on it, and saying, and I don't have the specific criteria right now, but I know that it is becoming more important and more prevalent on the government side. So yeah, those are just some examples that the trends that we're seeing within at the federal and the provincial front is that it's not mandatory, but they're testing out these impact models and criteria slowly.
Okay, on a very similar theme, the next question we have here is, are there any mandatory requirements for monitoring and reporting from BC and Canadian regulators yet, or potentially coming in the future?
So right now they're not to the ones that are small and medium-sized businesses. They're mostly applied, like not even ESG. There's as Jennifer mentioned, we have the against forced labor, and that's targeted at, very not targeted at you folks. But I mentioned earlier that this, I'm just going to read this because it became live, I suppose, is the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board, the Climate Sustainability Disclosure Standards. So that has been finalized, but it's not in force in terms of a regulation at all. It would be up to the regulators to adopt that within their regulations with environmental management acts or within acts, financial and that. So I think the fact that they sought to produce one from that sustainability board, the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board, I think that's a bit of a foreshadowing that, maybe the thought that it is coming. I can't predict the future, but I would say that they wouldn't have put their efforts, I don't think, to developing one if there wasn't some sense that would be needed eventually. I would just like to encourage folks to reach out and get in touch with me. We just have a quick discussion to see if you're ready or want to start something, and we can just even go over with the initial tools, decide where your company's at with its ESG, and see where you could go. Again, it's free. There's no obligation. You can share some tools. We can have as many or as few meetings as you'd like to discuss and just see if we can help you move along the way. I'd really be happy to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. And that's such a great opportunity. I hope that our attendees in the call are able to take advantage of that service. We will send an email out afterwards with some of the contact information and share the resources. So yes, that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you, Megan and Jennifer, for all the information and sharing those resources that are available to the membership.